Well, it is 4:01, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jackie Ronning, and on with me today, I have a few friends from my team. Start with Katrina. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Katrina Ingledrum. I'm the math coordinator for the state. Some of you may recognize me from one of the earlier sessions we did with Jackie on integrating reading and math. Um, but I'm here to support Jackie and might pop in and share some slides as we go later in the session too.
Kim.
Oh, they all know me. I'm Kimberly Evans. I am the early learning research analyst here, and I'm the other half of the early learning team. So, welcome everyone. Good afternoon.
And I see Miss Claire is there too.
I am here, and I am just here to learn as a very early beginner about early numeracy. I'm the ELA coordinator.
So anyway, that's part of all of the people who just introduced themselves are on the SIPL team with me. And we still haven't figured out how to get them to stop telling us that. Anyway, hooray. This is about me. I'm going to talk to us most of the time today. We're going to talk about numeracy. You should know I will never hide this. Numeracy is not my thing. It is my new thing. But it is not where all of my time and education has been focused, except for the last 3 months. But this is a little about me. Really, I just want you to know that I support teachers through technical assistance, professional development, coaching, and resources. Literacy, numeracy, social emotional health, it's all important. We're going to talk about all of that throughout this series. But I just say, let's do the work. And I'm glad you're here. So who is here with me? Tell us where and what you teach and how long you've been in education. Just drop that in the chat.
I'm on my phone. Can you hear me this week?
I can.
This is Jill. I just sent you an email and I'm traveling home to get on my laptop.
Okay.
So I will see you soon.
All right. Sounds good, Jill.
I'm Erica Kelly. I'm from Park City, and I teach the early entry kindergarten here. And I've been in education of some form or another around probably 20 years.
Yep. If your hips hurt every morning, you've been in education for 20 years.
Right.
Susie,
for sure.
Ashley.
I'm Sherry Daniels. I teach pre-K in Poplar. I've also taught Head Start for over 20 years. I basically could say that I grew up there. And then I went, took an adventure trip and came to the public school and taught kindergarten for 10 years. And then this grant came about. So they asked me if I would be interested. And I said, I'm not sure, but I will give it a try. And some days I feel like I did make the right choice, but then there's some days I'm like, oh, what am I thinking?
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm here and I'm ready to learn.
Sherry, I spent 5 years at Head Start, and I think I grew up there too. I've taken everything I learned from the Head Start model into the public school system, and I don't think I would have been as successful without it. Raylan. Hi, Raylan. We were just talking about Miles City the other day. Preschool, Trago. Nice. Well, welcome everybody. Let's just keep moving. If you didn't get a chance to get your typing in or tell us You can still raise your hand or type it in the chat. We want to know about you. Tiana, we know you. Miss Townsend. So the SIPL team is the Standards Instruction and Professional Learning unit here at the Office of Public Instruction. And our mission is we want to provide high quality, evidence-based and sustained professional learning that empowers educators and strengthens student outcomes across the state of Montana. If there's something you want to learn, we can probably get you there. We meaning the SIPL team. So make sure you have a place to jot down some notes today and maybe ideas, something you hear that you might want to learn more about. And let's just have a little look at this timeline. So in 2023, House Bill 352 came around, and this is called the Early Literacy Targeted Interventions. I'm assuming that you know about this because that's how you got to here. In 2023, then following the passing of that bill, the Board of Public Education created an advisory council. OPI created the early literacy team. That was two positions. That's Kimberly Evans and myself. And then OPI also developed what's called a collaborative. Similar to the advisory council, the collaborative is a group of people that were interested in helping to get this work implemented. I noticed that Caitlin Hall is on the call. She was a member of that collaborative. There she is. In 2024, we were, still building the plane as we were taking off, so to speak, but we got the guidance taken care of. We were able to get jumpstart programs implemented and started out in the state. And most of what we were doing was technical support for screening and implementation. And then of August in 2024, we started this virtual early learning series. Bringing us into 2025, we were out on some road shows trying to get into counties and areas of Montana that were not implementing early literacy programs. And those were fun adventures. We went out and gave wonderful PD, and we got to meet lots of teachers and be in some schools, and it was great. Schools want to do this. There are certain things that prevent them from implementing, but they're still engaged in the learning and all of that, even if they don't have any programs. So then here we are. Last spring, House Bill 338 passed, and that essentially just added numeracy to the work that we were already doing, meaning that being at risk for not being proficient in reading wasn't the only way that a child could get into a program. If they were found to be at risk for not being proficient in mathematics, they could also be brought into the program. And so now our name has changed to Early Targeted Interventions or Early Learning Targeted Interventions, because it's not just literacy or numeracy. And so this month, it's not September anymore, it's actually October, but we kicked off the learning series again for this year. We've hoped to weave numeracy topics into the learning series as much as we can. But I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Lots of things are happening with that. So we're working on a plan together. Katrina is rolling out revised math standards that'll be live in 2026. I think it's July. She's nodding. We're already working with them. She's developing guidance. They're not a secret. They're just not the ones that you are required to use at this moment in time. So with all of those things that are going on, we're working on a plan together that will bring math into the mix in a thoughtful and intentional way. Early math, excuse me. But for now, we're going to tackle little snippets at a time, and that's why we're here. Okay, so please take a moment to read this to yourself. This is the definition of numeracy from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Oops, I want to go back. So lots of big words in there, but I would like to propose, here's what stuck out to me, and I want you to think about it. It's a parallel skill to literacy. So take a moment to just think about that. What does that mean to you? There's no right answer. This is a conversation. We're just going to discuss this. But they're saying it's a parallel skill to literacy. So you can raise your hand and unmute and tell us what you think, or you can type in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. But what does that mean to you, that comment?
I would just say that reading is not, it kind of helps balance with math and reading.
Yeah.
I think that some of them are precursors to understanding if a child will be more successful in reading, if they struggle in math, but not always the scenario that we see if we're not fluent in and confident enough to be noticing and observing those types of things. I just think that math and I think all of them, they all web together, I guess, basically.
Yeah. Melissa says, I believe there is research that shows early numeracy skills are a strong indicator of early literacy. There is. I don't know exactly what they are. I know there is one tidbit of information that says whatever numeracy you bring with you to kindergarten is an indicator of how you'll do you can be doing later in high school. Which is crazy to think about. Yes, Trago School. Michelle. So we know what the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics says about what numeracy is, but how, like, if we really want to focus on early numeracy, what does that mean? And so in all of the work that I've done and all of the places I've gone to try to learn, I came up with this sort of pretty tight list. It's not all encompassing, but early numeracy is talking about these things you see on this list. Oh, thank you. Today, we're really going to talk about quantity, numbers, counting, and subitizing. Or subitizing. I've heard it said both ways. Phonetically, I don't think they're both right. So we're just going to say however you say it works for me. So number sense. Go ahead and read it. And this comes from the Erickson Institute and the Early Math Collaborative, which is a place I definitely suggest you go and visit and check out. And I have a link for it later. But number sense is defined as, go ahead and read that. For me, number sense, I used to think that it described numeracy. It is a big part of it. What do you guys think about number sense? Well, I know we've all heard it. And I know that I've even said as a teacher, this kid just doesn't have any number sense. But I didn't really know what that meant. So throw out what you think about number sense in the chat or orally.
Well, I guess what I think about is putting that picture of a number like 1 and then correlating it to one object. Is kind of what I think of when I think of number sense. And then we know with the age group that I work with, that's kind of what we work on, is them doing that 1-to-1, like, the number 1 means that there's 1 apple, or 2 means 2, there's 2, and you actually have the physical objects there so they can see that. That's kind of what I think of when I think of number sense.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody
So
else?
Sorry, Jackie. I work with a lot of our 3 through 5 right now, our grades 3 through 5. And we're sort of identifying, I don't know if this is right, but we're identifying with like place value knowledge. Like they don't have a sense of what the value of like the digit 7 would be in like 97,236 or something, like what that's worth. They don't understand that. It still seems really abstract to them.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that I think that it's kind of like solidifies their understanding or concrete knowledge of what numbers are and around them, like everyday usage and what it means, understanding.
Thank you, Sherry and Caitlin. Anybody else want to share?
I'd share. I've seen a lot of kids that are struggling with even identifying like how old their parents are. They say, "Oh, my mom's 85," and then they talk about how much lunch costs, and they're thinking, "Oh, it costs $20 for me to have school lunch." They're just not grasping things have different values and different numbers, and I've seen it struggling from K through 5 in my school.
Yeah. I'm so excited for a video that I'm going to show you in a few slides because I think it like brings this all together. Well, let's keep going. So number sense is counting, okay? But it's counting verbally. It's counting 1-to-1, which means you're actually counting objects. It's cardinality. So cardinality means that the last number said is the amount or quantity, depending on how you say that. Katrina's going to help us with something.
Nope, I was just responding to people.
Oh, something else. Okay. And counting has to do with subitizing. And subitizing is a big number sense thing. And then it is numerals. And a lot of what I've learned in the past 3 months, 6 months, is that numbers don't even have to come into play to be building number sense and numeracy. There's a handout at the end, Sherry. And I really have related that to, it is not the same, but if you think about what we know about phonemic awareness, does not need the alphabet. Number sense does not need a number.
You mean a numeral, right, Jackie?
Numeral. Yeah, a numeral. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. And then we're going to also talk about exposure to numbers. Now, sorting, measuring, comparing, and collecting, they are a part of number sense because when you do activities with them, you are building number sense, but they're also something that's a part of math that we're going to teach separately and together and in addition to. We may get to that today, but we may not. So let's talk about counting. At Head Start, I was introduced to the word rote. Can the child rote count? That means, can they recite number words in the correct and stable sequence? And some kids can count all the day long, but they don't know what they're counting. They're simply like repeating the alphabet song, right? They've memorized what it sounds like to count to 10. Ways that you want to help support that is to count every day, 1 to 10, forward and backward, right? Again, they don't have to know that they're going to use that then to, count how many toes they have. Oh yes, memorization for skip counting as well. They do. I noticed that with one of my own kids. Like I think they can do that. Oh, they really don't understand that. They're just saying that. And another way to help support all kinds of counting is to engage in books and rhymes, especially in that early literacy classroom or early learning classroom. But why do we stop? Once they get past kindergarten or first, it's like, why do we stop doing these fun age-appropriate activities? Because we can still be building that number sense and numeracy through some of that. Kids still want to listen to stories and engage with fun illustrations. So counting items is rational counting versus rote counting. And they're learning to match each object with one number, saying each number only once. You can move objects as you count. You can count them in a line. You can point and count them into containers. Lots of different ways that you can count. And honestly, sorting comes in as well. You can count and sort at the same time. What else did I want to say? I think that's it. So we're all pretty familiar and we work with rote counting and rational counting with our students. Plenty. That's probably not a mystery for how to get kids to work on that. Am we good with that? Yeah. So subbotizing. Does anyone want to take a stab at what subbotizing is? It says right here, but does anybody just want to talk about it?
I can talk
Sure,
about
this
it.
is Sarah. I work with our early literacy program with our 4-year-olds, and for us, we're working with really low numbers. We start with just being with 2, but just having 2 items out and being able to look at it without counting it and knowing that it's 2 items. So being able to just look and say that's 2 instead of trying to point count or touch count
Right.
or counting it. It's just being able to look and see, oh yeah, that's 2
Yeah.
of something.
What would you add to that? There was somebody else who was gonna, Melissa.
Oh, I was just gonna say how exactly what they just said, where like you see this and you know that's 5, and how
Yeah.
important that is. You see that prior to this role, I was in kindergarten, first grade for 17 years, and how many kids would hold up a hand and have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this 5, guys, it's always 5, all the way up through. your 10 digits. And it's so important because when we start to look at decomposing numbers, that if we have like a partner of 10, this is 10, it's always 10, it's 10 behind my back, it's 10 in the air, it's 10 to the side. And so if I have 3 and 7, so just being able to 5 and 2 is 7, being able to quickly know that without having to do this counting thing all the time. And then it also leads into when we start to add, being able to count on instead of having to count your first number and then continue to count. Yeah, this is a big one. This is like the money skill, I think.
Well, when we put it to our hands, there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, but I'll just share this. They say in brain imaging, when even adults are asked to count, the part of the brain that tells your finger to move lights up. So counting is connected to our digits. That makes a ton of sense. It's also so fascinating. Anyway, so syllabatizing is a crucial foundation for developing quantity and number composition. Here is, I've seen some videos on how to do this, but when we're talking about the 4-year-old classroom, okay, we're probably in numbers 1 to 5, right? We're not going to go beyond that till maybe later in the year. But it's this idea that you could hold up something with dots or, you know, whatever, 3 of something, for about 3 seconds, and then you put it back down, and the child should be able to tell you with their fingers. It's just matching it. They don't have to say that's 3. They just have to show you the same with their fingers. Some kids might do a 2 and a 1, right? They're not trying to do addition, but that is early addition. So you would show them the card and say, show me with your fingers how many. Just real quick activities like this. This can be transitioning out the door to lunch. This can be, okay, everybody's going to take a turn with a card before we go to work time. But this is like the lowest or easiest way of syllabatizing, and then it goes, you know, on up from there. Here is another play on that. Show me one more with your finger. Yes, represent the mathematical practice of representing. Show me one more, show me one less. So while they are learning to say or know that that is 3 without having to count them, they're also thinking about more and less and addition. Even though they're not really thinking about that, they're building the from the ground up in activities like this. These are things you could make cards and hold up. You could make them on a slideshow that you pull up on your screen. And funny how older kids that are past this type of thing still struggle to syllabatize when asked to do it because we don't practice it to keep it fresh. Okay, so when it comes to numerals, kids memorize those and they're ordered just like letters in their name, right? They memorize the counting sequence and they start to memorize numbers. They may be able to look at a number and say, that's a 5, but they have no other connection of what 5 means. Okay. You can see on here, 5 means a lot of different things and can be represented in a lot of different ways. This is not an inclusive sharing of that either. 5 is on your hand. 5 is money. 5 is on a dice. 5 can be in a 10 frame. When you see that, you automatically know that's 5. That's syllabatizing. Anyway, we want children to learn to identify the number, name it, and match it to a quantity, right? Those are tasks and skills that we ask them to be able to do, but it's not necessarily numeracy. Numeracy is understanding what 5 even means. So we got to provide lots of guidance and practice for children to connect counting to quantity. For first, second, and third grade, you're moving counting beyond 100. You're skip counting. You're counting objects. You're moving into decimals and things like that. You're counting on and back, but you can still be doing these small little activities to keep things fresh. And counting in context becomes really important in the later early grades, because they need to count when they're in place value. They need to count when they're dealing with money, time, chores, and routines. So exposure to numbers. All of us have in our 4-year-old classrooms, there's numbers around. Sometimes we don't even think about it. We might have numbers where they line up. We've got a number line. We've got all kinds of things. But how do we make it everyday real world, right? We're singing counting songs. We're reading stories. We have games. I learned this from actually handwriting without tears or learning without tears. When you associate numbers with, help them associate numbers with themselves and things that they know. So when in that program, it introduces numbers connected to, like, 8 is a spider, because all spiders have 8 legs. 5 would be, this, or everybody has 2 eyes. So that's something that doesn't change. So I just put it up there: 4 wheels on a 4-wheeler, 6 legs on a insect. 9 is a tough one. I can't remember what that program did, but 10 is going to be 2 hands, right? And then they're starting to develop, well, 5 is half of 10. 5 is half of my hands, or one of my hands is half of 10. And we need to use math vocabulary all day. They say there's a lot of different views on vocabulary out there when you're just looking at it from a math lens. I found some interesting things, some that I really disagreed with, because my background is definitely science of reading, structured vocabulary, explicit instruction. So there's definitely some interesting things out there. But we use math vocabulary every day. The children need to work with a concept to understand it. Transitions, routines, they're golden opportunities to sneak in mathematics. But what I also threw in here for you is, do you ever get, a couple months into school and realize that your kindergarten students didn't know the difference between a letter and a number? That got me my first couple of years, and then we overcame it because I was, ready. I was ahead of it. But numbers are symbols for quantities. They tell us how many. Letters are symbols for sounds. They tell us a sound. This is really interesting. Some kids, you can just tell them that, and then all of a sudden they know. And some kids take a very long time to get that they're all symbols, but they don't tell us the same type of thing. When we're talking about exposure to numbers, you want to have these things in your room, even if you don't necessarily use them in your teaching yet. You might be in a younger grade level, but we want to have 100 number chart. We want to have math toys that help us understand the, quantity of numbers. I had a toy. It was from McDonald's. No, it was Sesame Street. And it had numbers 1 through 10. And they were all different sizes, so that when you hung them on the scale that it came with, 5 and 4 would go together to equal 9 and it would balance out. And I've never seen a toy like that since. And this was given to me by like my husband's great aunt who taught when Christ was a kid, I think. So very interesting, but ideas like that where kids can put numbers in a balance scale. Who would have thought? You know, we understand we might put 3 cubes in a balance scale, but for them to say, oh, that is just like the number 3, that would be interesting. I'm sure there are companies out there making something like I've just described. Yeah. But it feeds intuitive, but I don't know how you say the word, Caitlin. Intuition. But also number lines. There's a lot of research out there that says that kids have to build their internal number line, right? And kids who struggle later on with math, especially because they just don't have this like numeracy, they don't have an internal number line. Our classrooms have at least one of something like this. Katrina's raising her hand. What do you want to share?
Thanks, Jackie. I just wanted to add that what we're finding is that having these resources out, like the number line or the number chart, that are accessible to children. Obviously, we have classroom management issues that come up sometimes with that, but as often as you can have them out for open access so kids can grab them when they want to use them, the more likely they are to know how to use them effectively. Which is so important because otherwise we hand them the number line and they haven't self-selected that tool and they don't really know how to unless a teacher's telling them that that's the appropriate tool to use. So keeping those as open and accessible as you can once those littles have that self-control is really helpful for long-term development.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just going to also say, anytime you can number spaces, why not? I don't know if you're in schools with classrooms big enough where each child is assigned a number. It's probably not if it's early kindergarten, but that's something you could consider. Each child is assigned a number. My daughter comes home and every time she has a paper, it's her name, but there's also a number. So then these are for some older, I don't know if we have really any people on here who teach older kids, just Caitlin, but these are ways you can expose children to numbers, which again is building numeracy, for more like first, second, and third grade. Number talks, you've probably heard about this, but number talks and counting collections and quick images are the 3 things that came up over and over and over in every website or book or things that I have been studying. So they have to be pretty common and considered best practices. I also found it interesting that they want us to use base 10 language. Katrina, do you have anything to say about that? About how when we're talking about numbers, we want to speak in base 10 language?
Yeah, a couple things. First thing that comes to mind is with ELL students, this is going to be particularly important. A lot of different languages, their numbers in the teens literally translate to 10 and 1 instead of 11 or 12, right? So we have separate words, they have words that go in connection. So for our ELL students, introducing teens by themselves is a challenge because they sometimes learn those numbers as 10 and 5 instead of 15. So other languages are set up in that base 10 language already. Obviously, we want our students to learn the English words for numbers. So having them learn that vocabulary of 15 is still important. But we also want to follow it up with some kind of an indication that that means that there's 110 and 5 ones happening. So in those older kids, we would typically show like maybe a couple 10 frames and show that there's one 10 frame filled up and 5 additional ones involved. But yes, that comes in. I think we see base 10 language coming in first grade for the first time. Don't think we have that in kindergarten. But it's never too late or never too early to start that. I have a 5-year-old at home. She just turned 5. And we have started that kind of from the beginning. So even though she doesn't fully understand the concept of a 10 yet, she knows that that is in the ones or in the tens place, that's a 1. It means we have 10 units, and then we have 5 more for the ones place. So good to start it. Is that what you were looking for, Jackie, or is there something I missed?
Yeah, I figured you could at least share some valuable insight from the standards.
Yep.
So
we're first grade. That's what I would summarize it as.
Yeah. I think don't ever shy away from giving a child a concept, especially if they're interested. It doesn't mean that you expect them, just because you talk to a preschooler or a kindergartner about place value, doesn't mean you expect them to master it. But you know, they love to hear, well, it's this and this, and you get to learn way more about that next year. Gives them something to look forward to. And when it comes up the next year, they're like, oh, I might know something about this. Like, we don't want knowledge to be a secret from kids.
Yeah, and you can connect it to those little kids back to that tactile piece Jackie was talking about. Yeah. And understanding that if we have 15, it means we have to count to 10 on our hands before we can continue to count, right? So that's one full set of hands filled up, and then we have to do 5 more to get to 15. So we can keep it at that tactile phase for them if that's where they're at. And we can go further, like Jackie was saying too, if they're interested.
Okay, so these are, I stole them off of the Interland out there on the web. However, these are really interesting to me because you can use something like this. These are quick. Is it a quick picture, quick visual? You can use it with any grade. Just depends on the content. But if you look at the yellow one, you're supposed to say which one doesn't fit. And also, that's the same question for the purple one. Which one doesn't fit? You really have to think about this. The numbers, I don't know the answer. I do know the answer to the purple one.
There's never an answer. It's a trick question.
Who wants to take a stab?
The purple ones only have 4 sides.
Yeah, so it's the pentagon that doesn't fit. Yeah. Oh, Kathy.
It's the 44 that doesn't fit in the other one. The rest are not doubles.
Okay.
They add up to 8. So 65 doesn't fit.
Yeah. See, my number sense is not sharp enough to even take me there. But that's cool. And I know even first graders that would just love this. You get competitive problem solvers, right? Puzzle completers, and they will just die for this kind of stuff.
When you run this routine, the easiest way to start it is by telling them that there's a lot of answers, because you will get your shy students to try, those ones that are a little apprehensive or nervous about math. If you just tell them, you can make a case for any one of these not belonging. I just want you to choose one and tell me why you think that one doesn't belong. You'll get more involvement and engagement. One thing that is really helpful with this routine For older kids who are able to write is to have them kind of jot thought, like think to themselves quietly and then do like a turn and talk or a pair and share. For those younger kids who aren't at that point, having them just self-reflect and think and then share with their neighbor is helpful. And then also having kids give an answer and then say, who else thought 17 didn't belong? And having them kind of raise and say, oh, can you explain why Jackie thought that 17 might not belong? And have them try to think about another person's thought process is really helpful. There's tons of ways you can do this. And there's a lot of PD out in the field on these which one doesn't belong routines.
And I'm showing you some of these routines because we know that we have literacy routines. They're not part of the program that we teach. We have a literacy block, right? We're going to get our lesson and our practice and all of that stuff done. But we also have external to that and inside of literacy routines that we do with our kids that build literacy. We need to remember that numeracy needs the same attention. If all the kids do in math that day was the lesson, it's a wasted opportunity. We're not trying to make more work for you. Please don't think that. But let's just examine our practice to see where we can sneak in another crumb. This would be probably a much younger. Now, all of the thing, everybody, what do you think when you see that? There's so many different ways that you could interpret this quick image. Type them in or say them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2 and 1. Yep. Let's go to the next one. What do you think for this?
Six and five.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more orange than yellow. You could do more or less. I immediately could subitize 5, but I had to count to get 6. I don't know if it's the arrangement of the circles or the colors. Let's look at this one. Eight plus 1. Oh, cool. Cool. So I think for me, and I've always struggled with math until lately I'm tapped into my brain a little bit more. But when I look at something like this and I wonder how long it takes kids to get to this, my first thing I wanted to do was I already see a group of 2 groups of 3. All right. So if I take those out of it, and then I realized, oh, there's 3 left. Like our brain immediately goes to how can we sort this out so that we can better understand it, right? Don't we do that with everything? This was my favorite. when they're different colors, it's easier to see the groups. But this is when we're teaching multiplication and arrays and groups of groups, this is what we're doing. Anyway, I see we're running low on time. How did that happen? This is the most important part, so stay with me. We're going to watch this video. I have to stop sharing and share again, though.
Welcome to the Greater Essex County District School Board calendar, where we will be focusing each month on the fundamentals of mathematics. Each month, we will be from Ontario to help us unpack put one. Let's start with a number line. We'll just put a 0 over here like you'd probably expect. However, we're going to do something you might not expect. Instead of putting a number like 10, 100, or even 1000 on the other end of this number line, I'm going to put 1 trillion. That's right, 1 trillion. The reason I'm doing this is to share just how important the idea of magnitude of number really is for all of us, but especially our students. And what I'm going to have you do is take a moment to think about where you imagine 1 billion going on that number line. Go ahead, take a little time, maybe even pause the video to visually place where you would put 1 billion on the number line, or even draw it out. So, what do you think? Do you think that a billion would go somewhere around here? Well, that would mean that 1 billion is half of 1 trillion. How about somewhere around here? Now, this might seem more reasonable. However, that would mean that 1 billion is 1/4 of 1 trillion. And that's not quite accurate either. How about here? Nope. When we really think about it, 1 billion is 1/1000th of a trillion. In other words, there are 1,000 billions in 1 trillion. Did you think that 1 billion would be this close to 0? I know that initially I wasn't thinking about it that way myself. And that's because I wasn't thinking about the magnitude of the numbers comparatively to one another. Now you might be wondering to yourself, why does the magnitude of number matter anyway? Well, research tells us that increasing reliance on linear representations of number, just like that number line we used just a moment ago, plays a central role in the development of numerical knowledge. And in fact, Kathy Fosno, an educator and researcher of how children learn mathematics, goes on to explain that developing our understanding of magnitude of number is a way to help students build that understanding.
Just moving forward for a sec.
We already gave a pretty extreme example to possibly highlight our own limited understanding of magnitude as numbers get quite large, like billions and trillions. Let's take some time to think about what this might look like for our youngest learners who are just learning how to count. We need to keep in mind that just because a child can count to 10, 20, or even 100, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have an understanding of magnitude. So we're going to begin with one of the most accessible linear models for our youngest learners that we typically call a number path. Now, it might be helpful early on to leave some space between the squares so that children can feel as though they are counting a set, but over time, removing that space can be helpful to also make measurements. Now, if I was to cover this number path up with this bar, we still know there are 10 squares underneath. A good way to develop student understanding of magnitude would be to ask students where about do they think the number 2 or the second square would go. We could then ask them to tell a neighbor or their siblings if you're at home while you're doing this. Ask them to point on the screen or on the paper if you've cut these out to get a sense of their understanding of magnitude.
we don't have to listen to all of it, but I thought that was a really good explanation of magnitude. And like you said before, our kids don't know. If I told them that I was 17, they would believe me because 17 is bigger than 5. So they're going to accept that. I have done that also. And then a 6th grader will chime in. She is not. She's older than my mom. Anyway. We have run right out of time, and that's okay because I have lots of stuff for the next one. Katrina, do you want to take them through your information while I drop some things in the chat?